One of the services I used to make this video was actually today's sponsor, Storyblocks. It's unlimited access to over 1 million quality stock videos, songs, and more, all in exactly one subscription, but more on that later. Samuel Bellamy decided that autumn to leave the grassy shores and flickering taverns of the Cape. Townsfolk would later tell how the poor English sailor bid farewell to the young and fair Mary Hallett, a dear lover to whom he promised to return. Whether or not one should indulge old and dubious romantic tales, Bellamy did, in truth, take to the sea with a crew, for something wicked had happened in the warm waters of Florida. Misfortune begat fortune, turned beggars into kings, honest men into villains. Spain demanded riches from her colonies. With regularity, the economy of a global empire was loaded onto massive and heavily armed galleons and sent to the home country. Years of delaying the voyage meant that this treasure fleet was larger than usual. After departing Havana, the ships encountered wind, and below decks the cargo rattled. Tons of New World gold, silver, and gemstones, Spanish coins struck in the conquered capital of the Aztecs, as well as Chinese porcelain and other Eastern treasures shipped from the Spanish Philippines. The sea then began to loom about the galleons. The shouts of sailors were drowned by the scream of the hurricane. Hulls tore against the reefs and men spilled into the void by the dozens. All 10 of the Spanish ships were wrecked. Scattered for miles along the Floridian coast were the corpses of over 1,000 sailors, and one of the greatest treasures ever lost. Spanish authorities sent salvage crews to glean the tides, while indigenous and African slaves were forced to dive the wrecks. Many perished in the process. Word of the disaster soon escaped these shores. By January, the coast was infested with interlopers prowling for treasure. The 26-year-old Bellamy arrived in the company of his friend Palsgrave Williams, who had left behind a wife and children, a settled life as a New England silversmith, in order to join this voyage. The crew's efforts to dive the coast yielded paltry earnings. Around the same time, one Captain Henry Jennings, joined by the brutal Charles Vane and Edward England, attacked a Spanish salvage camp and sailed off with over 350,000 pieces of eight. A new golden age of piracy was coming. Sam Bellamy felt its call. The War of the Spanish Succession had scarred Europe and its colonial possessions. From 1701, powers including England and the Dutch Republic went to war against France and Bourbon Spain over the heir to the Spanish throne. The belligerent nations mobilized massive navies and encouraged other sailors to become privateers. In effect, state-sanctioned pirates licensed to attack and plunder the non-combat vessels of enemy nations. The end of the war by 1714 thus brought poverty. The sudden flood of jobless sailors drove down wages, and those who found work often faced the rigors of life as a merchant crewman, brutally punished by captains, poorly fed, and routinely cheated out of their already trifling pay. Pirates divided earnings far more equally and made decisions by committee. With relative ease, Bellamy and Williams mustered around 40 men to their cause. From a pair of sailing canoes, they began robbing merchants in the waters of Central America. They seized an English vessel, but sailing toward Cuba with their prize, they were pursued by 4 sloops and fled. Bellamy then realized the men aboard the advancing fleet were fellow scoundrels. He approached the commander, the notorious Henry Jennings, and the two pirates formed an alliance to take a nearby French ship called the Sainte Marie. Bellamy led the assault. The pirates opened with scattered gunfire, and Bellamy shouted that he would massacre the crew if they resisted. They surrendered, and some of Jennings' men went aboard to secure the prize. Jennings thereafter tortured some other Frenchmen to reveal the location of another vessel, the Marianne. He sent men to find and capture it, but then noticed that very ship cutting out to sea as the captive prize of his rival, the pirate Benjamin Hornigold. Jennings gave chase, but with his back turned, Bellamy and Williams overtook the St. Marie, and holding Jennings' men at gunpoint, they stole the treasure for themselves. A haul worth 100 times the annual salary of a merchant captain. Betrayed by Bellamy and having failed in his hunt for Hornigold, Jennings set a course for safer shores. An old fort crowned by dormant cannon stood at the entrance of the harbor. Sailors dawdled about, swilling wine and rum, while others lugged ashore indigo, sugar, cotton, tar, and gold, all of it stolen. When daylight waned, the men spent their coin in brackish taverns, gambling dens, and brothels. Here was the pirate paradise of Nassau. This island had been almost entirely abandoned by the English during the war, and so Benjamin Hornigold had established here a haven open to thieves, cutthroats, and smugglers. And it was Hornigold who now happened to cross Bellamy and Williams off the coast of Cuba. He admired the daring of the young pirate Bellamy, so he merged the crews and made Bellamy captain of the Marianne. They were joined by the ruthless French pirate Olivier Levasseur, sometimes called Le Bouze, the Buzzard. And under Hornigold's command, the three vessels spent the coming weeks marauding the seas for treasure. Hornigold then sailed to Nassau to replace his failing ship, and returned to find that Bellamy and Le Bouze had plundered British vessels in his absence. Whether out of patriotism or self-preservation, Hornigold styled himself not a pirate, but a privateer, still waging war against Great Britain's French and Spanish enemies. Sam Bellamy had forsworn loyalty to king and country, and the crew had become richer for it. So the matter was put to a vote. The crew elected Bellamy as their new captain, and Hornigold and a few of his supporters, including the bold Edward Thatch, were sent away. Alongside Le Bouze, Bellamy and Williams continued to ravage trade routes. Bellamy took a new flagship and gave the Marianne to Williams, and the three vessels cruised south to rest for a few weeks on an island off of South America, making repairs and drinking heartily. Le Bouze amicably left their company, and Williams and Bellamy headed to the Virgin Islands. There they rescued and added to their ranks some castaway French pirates. The crew had already been supplemented by the sailors of victim vessels. Some volunteered to join the pirates, but Bellamy also forced others of useful talent, carpenters and surgeons, to join his crew under the threat of death. When they attempted to escape, he had them whipped. Victims of piracy almost always surrendered without resistance. Bellamy would take supplies, valuables, a few men to bolster the crew, and sail off. But dangerous ships lurked these waters, and Bellamy desired a craft capable of battle. With 18 guns and ample cargo space, the Whydah galley departed from Port Royal. She was named for the kingdom of Whydah, one of several polities along an African coast where millions of men, women, and children would be abducted from the hinterland and traded to European merchants. The Whydah was a slave ship. Having sold its African captives in Jamaica, the crew had cleared the hold of any corpses and excrement, and therein stowed the rewards of their long voyage: sugar, indigo, silver, and gold to be transported to London. The captain then spied two ships in the distance. Day and night they seemed to follow, for hundreds of miles, until the two vessels of Bellamy and Williams closed in and raised their black flags, with Death's Head and bones across. The Whydah desperately fired a few shots from her stern before surrendering. The raucous pirates overran the deck, and at a nearby island, Bellamy forced some of the crew to join his fleet. He gave the captain his old vessel, then added 10 guns to the Whydah and took it for himself. Bellamy's suddenly wealthy crew included Dutch and Irishmen, Scotsmen and Swedes, a number of black runaway slaves or freedmen, an indigenous American, and even a 9 or 10-year-old boy who had begged to join them. They dressed lavishly and left fear in their wake. A British colonial governor failed to make a report on the Virgin Islands. I would have gone, but had an account that the pirate ship and sloop commanded by Bellamy were still amongst these islands. For these reasons, and these only, I durst not venture down. Bellamy and Williams sailed north along the coast of British America, preying on many vessels, including that of one Captain Beer. Bellamy fancied himself a virtuous thief, so when his crew chose to burn Beer's sloop, he honored their vote but apologized to Beer. "Damn my blood, I'm sorry they won't let you have your sloop again, for I scorn to do anyone a mischief when it is not for my advantage." Then the pirate's demeanor changed. "Though damn ye, you are a sneaking puppy, and so are all those who will submit to be governed by laws which rich men have made for their own security. They vilify us, the scoundrels do, when there is only this difference between us. They rob the poor under the cover of law, and we plunder the rich under the cover of our own courage." They burned his ship, and Williams took Captain Beer to dump him on Block Island, where Williams was also intending to visit family. He and Bellamy planned to reconvene on the desolate coast of what was then eastern Massachusetts, sometimes called Maine. Bellamy first set a course for Cape Cod in late April of 1717, to restock and perhaps visit Mary Hallett. A rolling fog concealed the coast. Bellamy had put some of his crew aboard 3 ships he had captured along the way. But as night fell, terrible winds separated the fleet. Rain drummed against the shifting deck. The Widow was pulling toward the coast, and Bellamy shouted to drop anchor. The anchors started dragging. The ship ran aground, the mast snapped, and waves pulled sailors from the deck, crushed them under cannons, and the hull split open. The Widow galley and over 100 men were lost. Only 2 sailors on the Widow that night made it to shore. One of Bellamy's prize vessels had also run aground. 7 of her crew were arrested in addition to the Widow survivors. Williams cruised the Maine coast, awaiting Bellamy. It would be weeks before he went to Cape Cod and learned the fate of his friend. Of the survivors, 2 carpenters were acquitted for having been forced into piracy, and the indigenous Central American pilot of the Widow was likely sold into slavery. The remaining 6 sat in their cells. There was talk that pirates, including Edward Thatch, now the feared Captain Blackbeard, would take revenge if the pirates were executed, but the inmates held no hope of rescue. They were instead visited often by Cotton Mather, the Puritan minister who had decades earlier supported the Salem witch trials. He implored them to seek divine forgiveness, and in the end he accompanied the 6 compatriots of Sam Bellamy to the water's edge and watched them hang. Mather wrote, "With such madness go to the dead. Behold, reader, the end of piracy." But the last stand of Nassau and the final exploits of Hornigold, Jennings, Charles Vane, and Blackbeard were yet to be written. Williams would return to Nassau and sail again with Labuse. And the story of Mary Hallett became a dark legend among the people of the Cape. It was said that after Bellamy left, she learned she was pregnant with his child, but the infant was found dead, Mary accused of murder and devilry. Scorned by the town, she became a recluse, a sorceress who conjured storms against passing ships, remembered as the Witch of Wellfleet. Whatever ludicrous tales abounded, there was indeed a Mary Hallett of Cape Cod, who died in 1751, childless and unmarried. And finally, somewhere in the dark lay a pirate's tomb, the sunken Widow galley. For some time after the wreck, bits of cargo and the slack-jawed remains of her doomed crew were spat out of the abyss, but the ship remained lost for nearly 3 centuries. In 1984, she was found. Year by year, cannons, clothes, treasure, and shards of bone returned from the depths. The Widow had gone down with her captain, the pirate lord, Sam Bellamy. The footage you're looking at right now and several clips you just watched came from story blocks. I could have used 10 hours of 4K clips from them and it wouldn't have cost me a cent more. I just would have run out of things to talk about. You pay one set price subscription cost and Storyblocks gives you unlimited downloads of professional content you can use anywhere and it's royalty free forever. And again, no more expensive pay-by-the-clip pricing. If you do anything creative or for a business, it's a scary good deal. Getting this pirate horde of HD stock footage, templates, images, and sound effects you can download at any time. And whether or not you have experience animating, you can really spruce up your projects with sleek motion graphics and titles that work easily with editing programs like After Effects, Premiere Pro, and Apple Motion. To get started with unlimited stock media downloads at one set price, head to storyblocks.com/historydose or just click the link in the description.